All right. Welcome to Too Many Adults in the Room podcast. I have some amazing students with me, and there are 4 adults in the room. I'm the only one that's going to be a part of this conversation. This conversation is going to be on redistricting in Howard County from the perspective of students, since they are the ones that are affected the most. So before we dig into our conversation, I think it's important for you all to have a little bit of an understanding of who is in the room. So I have asked the amazing students in the room to kind of give an introduction, and they were going to give you as much information as they feel comfortable with giving you. All right. So whoever would like to start us off, remember you only are obligated to say the school that you're coming from and then your grade. Any other information is what you choose to let people know.
All right. Hello. My name is Darlene, and I'm a senior at Long Reach.
I'm Camille, I'm a junior at Long Reach.
I'm Amaris, I'm a junior at Centennial.
I'm Maya, I'm a senior at Long Reach High School.
I'm Aaron, I'm a senior at Long Reach.
I'm Liel, I'm a senior at Long Reach.
I'm Jordan, I'm a junior at Howard.
I'm Caleb, I'm a senior at Wild Lake.
Wow, having trouble.
I'm Aisha, I'm a senior at Long Reach.
I'm Leah, I'm a senior at Long Reach.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a senior at Centennial.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. So to get right into the conversation, just so everyone listening understands, this group, in one way, shape, or form, has had some interaction with understanding redistricting. We've done work as a collective on purpose to understand some of the issues so that we could have a little bit of context for this conversation. And then, of course, other people have had their own experiences outside of this group where they've learned about this. So in this conversation, our point is to try to explore redistricting as a concept and how it's affected our community from the perspective of students, which are the people that are going to be affected by it the most. So the first question that I want to ask you all, and this can be like our baseline question, anything else that you want to communicate to one another you can dive into. I'm curious, beyond the things that we've done together as a collective, how have you learned about redistricting as a process and what's going to happen in Howard County?
I would say that I learned from my mom. My mom is very involved in the county. Well, she doesn't work for the county, but she's just involved in my brother and I's education like that. So she was watching the Board of Education, like the forums and everything. And that's when I started like hearing about it. And then as I was listening to what some of the kids were saying, I was like, that doesn't seem right. And then I saw like the other news outlets doing stories about us. And then I read the articles about it. And that's where, I guess like the media is where I really saw it.
I think my first interaction was when my friends thought they were going to get redistricted last year. And they were really upset about it. So they started sending letters to the board about it. And I understood it from their perspective, which was that they didn't want to move away from their social lives. But now looking at it in a different context, I see a broader perspective, I would say.
I would say I learned about it through school because, like, going to Centennial, most people go there because it's, like, known as, like, an academic school. And if you're going to, like, move into that district, you wouldn't want to have, like, the house that you live in go to, like, a different school that isn't as academically, like, good or something, yeah.
Oh, also, I think it started with, like, when people started sending letters and, like, the letters got posted, and some of them were saying, like, hateful things about certain schools. I think that's really what started it, like, from my perspective. And then, like, my school even did, like, a restorative justice thing because there was letters sent that why sending your kids to Long Reach would be bad. But, like, coming from a student who goes there, I think that was like, really not, like, hurtful. I just felt, like, so defensive, like I had to defend my school because it, like, unless you go there, I feel like you have no right to, like, say how bad it is like anything about it.
I felt the same from, like, a Wild Lake perspective as well, because we got a lot of letters from, like, the River Hill parents, not directed at us, but more at, like, the school in general, just how they didn't want to go there. So I see what you're saying is, like, you didn't want to take it personal, but at the end of the day, you ended up kind of, I took it personal a little bit.
So my friend was districted to go to Long Reach, but he really didn't want to go there because of the reputation. It has someone out who's homeschooled, He went to elementary and middle school completely normal, went to school and everything, and then like he just really didn't want to learn language, so, and that's great. He decided to become homeschooled.
I just like to put out there that any school in Howard County has you'll get a good education, because I intern at a middle school in the city, and the high schools that some of these middle schoolers have to go to, I don't know, I just feel like the education that you'll get anywhere in Howard County, whether it's Hammond or Centennial, it's gonna be a good education. So I feel like that's something that people forget about.
Right.
Definitely.
I used to go to school in Anne Arundel County, and let me just say, it was so different. The people there, they didn't really care about learning. They didn't really care about any extracurriculars or any of that. They didn't even have GT classes. So it was just a very laid back in terms of academic performance, and it just wasn't the right environment for me, because I like the academic rigor.
So,
go ahead. So I feel like there is something to say that there is academic
rigor?
No, the opposite. I like backness.
Academic lax.
I feel like an argument should be made for that. In the sense, not in the sense that you shouldn't work hard. I mean, in the sense that it's to the approach of how you were taught. If you're taught in a way where it's very high pressure, yes, for some people, who just spoke, that works for them, and that's great. But if you want to work at a more not as rigorous pace, I feel like that should also be equally seen and an opportunity. It has its own good points.
I want to reframe. So this is connected to the first question, but I think this might help us answer a little bit better. And you all were kind of leading into this. So the original question was basically, how have you learned about redistricting? Where have you heard it from? It seems like a lot of us have either heard about it from peers that got it from other things or were affected by it, or our parents or social circles. Now that's what we've heard. What I'm curious also about is what you all understand through your own observations. So you've been given information about redistricting one way or another, but now you all have had the opportunity to kind of process it for yourself, and I'm just curious, where are you at with understanding what this means for Howard County from your perspective?
What I wanted to say is I think that what you can tell about the redistricting policy is that Howard County is making a step in the right direction in terms of more equal distribution of socioeconomic groups, but also just diversity in general, and that's just something I support, and that's what I've come to understand about the redistricting, the whole policy is that, yeah, it's complicated and it's messy, but the goal at hand is there's not really an easy way to do it. Right. So it's kind of something you have to kind of brace yourself for, because it is a step in the right direction, and that's what I think there's such a disconnect between the people that are for it and are not for it, is because there's just a fundamental disagreement on what people seem to think is important. In this county, I feel that if you don't value diversity to a certain extent, I think you're pushing back the county, because the county has made it explicitly clear that that is their goal, and they're trying to further that. And yeah.
Going off of what was said, I completely agree. I think that Howard County is going in the right steps, in the right direction, and they're trying to move forward. And the overall goal of diversifying not just by race but by socioeconomic classes is really great. The only thing is, I think people are, from just looking at it, people are so scared and they're letting their ignorance drive their fear, because a lot of the reason why they don't want to go are the reasons why that they shouldn't, that the points that they're making. I'm not saying that they're not valid, but some of it seems like it just seemed like they're ignorant to it, and it's some of the stuff that they're saying is going to happen isn't going to happen to them. And I think they need to not be not selfish, but I think they need to take into consideration what the goal at hand is, not
the bigger
just
picture.
Yeah, the bigger picture. I think they're fixated on, oh, I don't want to move, but like if I move, like, you know, how many other kids will benefit from that?
Mm.
And also, I think it's like it needs to be established that your kid necessarily won't like really hurt from it either. Like if you perform at a certain level, I think that speaks for itself. And especially if you're moving within the county and it's Howard County, you're gonna get a good education. And I think increased diversity is just gonna help with that education. You're gonna get a better experience, I think.
I feel like there's like a second kind of like thing you learn by being in a diverse setting, because if you're in a homogenous setting, you won't like learn how to interact with different cultures. So I'm so for redistricting, because I feel like, you know, the world is different. There are lots of different people, and I feel like learning how to deal with different people from different backgrounds at a young age is really important.
Yeah, so you won't be shocked at the real world.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of kids, Howard County is already like a little bubble. So if we keep things how they are and keep things kind of, it's not, I don't want to say, it kind of is segregated. Like you can tell that it is segregated by certain areas, not specifically by race, but definitely by socioeconomic classes. It is segregated, and you need to be able to be in an environment where there's a mix of people, because that's how the world is. You're not going to be around the same type of people, because as soon as you leave Howard County, you're going to be shocked, and you don't want to be like 20-something just now realizing what the real world is like, because you're not going to benefit from that.
Well, I agree that at least in my school, I can't speak for any other school, but I feel like personally that I live in a pretty diverse school. Like I know I know people who are very well off economically, and those that are not, and there's so many different cultures and ethnicities that are represented at my school. I'm like, so I always thought that Howard County was a very diverse place, but interesting point.
I think a huge problem is that a lot of students and parents are being misinformed, or they're only seeing or hearing about one side of the issue, not being able to really research into it. For example, we hear a lot of students saying who are juniors and seniors worrying about, juniors more, or sophomores, who are worrying about moving schools because it may affect their college recommendations, or they're going to be pulled from their social circles. And what's important to learn about that is that it's not going to affect the juniors and seniors now, and that it's something that's going to affect like a new role of students. So it's not like you're being completely thrown into this new situation without any sort of cushion to lean on.
Yeah, I would be way more pressed about this if I was younger and like kind of personal. But my little sister is 2-time homecoming princess at Long Reach, and you know, if they move her, that's kind of like I wanted a dynasty to be established.
Your
That's a real threat. They're about to send her to open those, I think. She's a sophomore, so yeah.
But they said rising juniors, if you they have they put out that thing, like if you provide your own transportation, you can still
be like grandfathered in.
Right.
Yeah, so like they are like listening to both sides, and they are doing like the school board is
making
accommodations. Accommodations. That's what I meant to say. Like they're making accommodations for certain people, so people don't like they'll make the transition like okay, or more people would agree to it.
Right. And if we don't make this transition now, then when are we gonna make it?
I know.
I mean, it's a problem in the years.
Yeah, and you can't please everyone.
Yeah, and like going back to the whole goal of it, like I go to Centennial and it is so overcrowded there. Like walking from the hallways, like you literally get shoved multiple times just in that small 5-minute period, and you get like kids cutting through other people's classrooms because you just can't survive like all the squish, and like there's always, you know, those people that are running through the halls and shoving other people. And it's also that I honestly, like, I'll just go to the bathroom to avoid that entire crowd and just try and wait it out. Like, they'll be late to class, and we have 8 portables now this year, because that's just how overcrowded the school is. Like, I agree with the ideas of redistricting, but I feel like instead of maybe moving everybody, you should just try and build, like, a larger school, especially Centennial. At the very least, Centennial, because, like, it's been around for a very long time. It's never been, like, you know, remodeled or re-updated. Like, if the redistricting doesn't happen, something definitely needs to happen to my school because it is way too crowded.
They're building a new school.
Yeah, we're putting all this steam into building all these new schools, but we're not helping the old ones as much.
So then to ask the question, like, since all these juniors and senior parents and students feel this way, and they're most of the people that are arguing their point and protesting and all that, why? If they're not being affected, then why?
I feel like people, I don't know, people are so like, they're wary of change, and like, like me personally, when I first heard about redistricting, I thought, like, my first thought was just like, ew, why are we doing this? And like, I was just like, wow, my sisters are literally going to a different school, they're gonna lose their friends. And like, I was just so against it for like the longest time. But that one meeting that I missed, that there was a representative that came to like talk about it. One of my friends had told me like more in depth about it and how she thought it was like kind of a good idea, and I was really looking at it, and like, I feel like Howard County, the way they came about it, like, they just kind of sprung it on us. But I mean, change, like how you said, change is inevitable. Like, if not now, then when? So I feel like springing it maybe wasn't the best. And like, people who heard it at first, all they heard was my child might be going to a different school, and they didn't like the sound of that, because like, they're secure with the education that their child is getting now. So it's like, if they're going to a different school, the education might be different, and they're not like here for it. But then and I just feel like amendments can always be made. Like, it's not completely definite. Like, it's not just, oh, we're moving these people to the school and that's it. That's not period, point blank, and that's what people are seeing. So it's like they are very misinformed, I think.
Can you speak more to, because I think it's interesting you own that you're like, I didn't like this at all. Like, how it first hit me when I first heard about it, it sounded like it wasn't a good idea. And you talked about this transition happening for you. I was wondering if you could speak to that more, that transition, what things you saw that made you actually change your mind.
Well, I was misinformed too. I was just going based off of what parents and stuff were saying, like how the students' social life would like be messed up and the commute would disrupt their education, and that's all. Like, I agree with that. Like, that's always a possibility. But then I also see what the superintendent, what he's trying to do. Like, he's trying to like make it more equitable and like equal everywhere, and like, I think that's, like, I really commend him for that. Like, he's really trying. And like, I forgot that there's like, you can always change things if it's not like working. So it's not like if it doesn't work out, they're just gonna leave it as is. They can always be changed in the long run if like there's still a problem. So then that's when I was like, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. And like, I think it might give people a better opportunity, because the schools that are like overcrowded, they're also underfunded. So if you figure out overcrowding, then maybe funding might get better and like problems could get fixed, you know?
I feel like also with like going back to the protesting and all that, like people, the accommodations that they're making for like towards the because like the plan has very equitable characteristics to it, but people are looking for things that they can take from it, which is not really how that works. Because it's like, we're trying to offer everybody something that everyone can work with, but people just want to, like, they want to pinpoint what they want instead of what they can have. And so like, that's just what the main problem is, because people can't really choose what's happening. But like, if you think back to like a few years ago when we were in middle school, they redistricted us. Like, we got moved. Half of us got moved from Mayfield to Thomas Viaduct, and like, we were fine. Like, it was perfectly fine.
It was a blast, honestly.
It was so fun. It was the most stunning thing ever. They just said next year, it was only like, we had like 2 months left of school, and they were like, okay, you guys aren't coming back next year, you're going to Thomas. We were like, what the heck?
That was a ground shaker.
It was really shook. But then we were all fine. Like, we moved on. And like, I feel like if that was to happen again, or if they were to make a new school, it wouldn't be a problem. Like, the kids would move on from it like that. Because it's not like you're going into an environment where you're all alone.
Yeah.
Everyone knows everybody. Like, this is high school. If you want to connect, you can connect. Not everybody has to be at the same school to be friends.
Right. Technology. Like, you still have contact.
And then,
Right.
Yeah, friends are, like, people should learn how to develop, like, your friendships outside of school.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot healthier, too.
Yeah.
I mean, what's important about redistricting too is that you're not totally alone. They're moving you with other people who are in your neighborhood, who are near you. So it's not like you're going to go in with absolutely nobody you know. You're going to go in with a few people that you may know not so well, but you'll get to know better.
Yeah, and environment change is good. Like, that just helps people, I think. Also, I have a question, kind of. So, like, I know that they're making a new school, so then obviously you're going to have to district kids into that new high school. But, like, shouldn't we wait until the new high school's built so we can get all the redistricting just done in 1 year?
I think they're doing this because they need money. Because, like, for the school, but I don't know, like, all the facts, but I know that to get, like, the new school, it costs a lot of money, and then, like, the state can give us money, too, but also we need to fix the problem we have now, because there's some schools that are, they're
way
being,
undercrowded.
like, undercrowded, like, they're
Overcrowded.
not being used to their capacity, and it's wasting money, and there's also schools that are, like, it's too crowded, and there's not enough space for them, so I think they need to fix that problem, and then, like, maybe we'll get more money.
It's essentially
school, too.
getting into compliance.
So getting ready for the new school, kind of.
Because the numbers are so like
So
we're really out of whack. So it's
We
like, hey, in
need
order for us to seem as though we're actually being equitable, like the undercrowding and overcrowding has to be fixed, even beyond like a resource-based level. Like that doesn't make sense. So like,
I have a question.
before we get into the weeds of that, because we don't actually know all of those answers, I do want to kind of bring us back to some of the things that you all have been saying, and I've like kind of like captured a couple of them, and I just want to put them into the room, and just to see like how we're processing it. And I think it connects to this idea of like selfishness and selflessness that I heard around redistricting earlier as well. So it seems like we're really talking about there are two different like camps of what's going to happen and how people are thinking about this. The first camp is the change that's going to come to your life. So if I'm redistricted, or what redistricting is going to do for me or to my child is it's going to change or cause like upheaval in their social life. It's going to cause a longer commute. It's going to affect my housing cost, or how much my house is worth based on the house, based on where my child is redistricted, and ultimately it's going to cause a change or an upheaval of what we're used to. The other side on why this is happening, some of the things that you all have said, is that there will be less crowding. That will actually like level out some of the population problems or hiccups that are happening. People will have more access to resources. And there was another one that you all said that I didn't outright that I wanted to name, but I can't remember it. Did I miss anything in terms of what we feel like it's up against? All right, cool. So with that being said, what? Oh, yep, that was my phone. So with that being said, it seems like there's like higher stakes for one or the other. I'm curious how you all interpret that, and if any of you were going to be affected by this, like directly, would that change your opinion? Because I'm assuming that none of you are going to be actually affected by redistricting.
No, sir.
Right.
Yeah, like on that note, I just know that I'm not being affected, but if I was to, I'd be going to Oakland Mills, and it kind of goes back to what Leah was saying about like how people are concerned about like the what can I gain. I do not want to go to Oakland Mills, frankly. Like I feel like if I could go to any of these 11 schools, just like as an environment change, you know, that would be the first one I would pick, just for whatever reason. And you know, but I've kind of moved past that. I moved past that for my sister because, you know, once again, it's not about what you're specifically getting out of it, because you know you can find good in every situation you're put in, and there's like me hypothetically going to Oakland Mills is not really going to cause any problems in my life. I think, you know, like it might not be my ideal situation, but that doesn't make it a problem. So just like, you know, it's obviously my personal mindset, but don't create problems where problems aren't there. Like, is you really being redistricted to another Howard County, so, you know, like country-renowned school, really that big of a problem?
Yeah. And if you actually look at the numbers, so we had someone come in and like talk to us about redistricting, and if you actually look at the commute, like the average times that are actually being, if this change is implemented, how would it actually affect us? The average commute time I think was like 5 more minutes, and there were like other things I can't remember. Do you guys remember any of them?
Yeah, I think the gist was that it just isn't that extreme.
Right.
Like,
it isn't
everything
extreme
is
as people
so
are making it out to be.
It would also make overcrowding essentially almost non-existent. Only a few of the schools would be closer to overcrowding. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I think getting those farms numbers like about equal is so important, because those are like specifically a group of people in the county that we have like singled out for being like socioeconomically struggling, and that we can evenly distribute. Like this plan evenly distributes them, and for some reason we're not all on board with that. Like that's very important, I think.
And that would also solve another main problem with like the diversity issue, because there's like all these like, as of now, like you can tell which like this area is like these people are like they're rich and they're white, or like these people they're like Latino or black and they're not that rich, like they're poor, or these people are just middle class and they're just like whatever, like you know, like you can look at a certain school and be like these people are that, like this classification. But like if you were to mix it up and like even like if you were to get the farms numbers like evenly distributed, then like that would literally be like everyone's just the same. Like there's no kind of difference between any schools. You can't say like, oh, my school's better than yours because we're richer, or oh, hey, you guys have more black kids, you guys are trash. Like, you know what I mean? Like you guys are ghetto. Like that wouldn't be a thing, and that would just change the culture in Howard County, like in general.
That's
because
so
because like kids are growing up. Like I grew up like in Howard County in elementary school. Like there weren't that many like people of like color or race. Like it was just yeah, like, you could count like the number of black people or Hispanic people on your hand, and like that was just like whoa. Like I hardly knew other people of color. Like I grew up with white kids. I grew up in another country where people were mainly like white skinned, so like I did not even know black people like that. And so like, but then I came to middle school and high school and I was like shook because I didn't know that kind of like that's my own culture and I wasn't even exposed to it. So like that's crazy for me because that's like a culture shock to my own culture.
That's the word I was looking for.
You're hitting on something that it sounded like you all were touching on, but I didn't want to name it until it was named. But I think.
Sorry.
No, so the undercurrent of what we're really talking about when we're talking about redistricting has a lot to do with race and socioeconomic status, and then how people are perceived and what schools are perceived as based on the race or socioeconomic status that resides in that school.
Right.
Yeah. Like I'm on like the reduced lunch program, and I'm one of those people. Like I get like like help with like my AP testing and my SATs. Like they give me fee reductions, which is honestly really, really helpful. Because like instead of having to pay $94 for every exam, I only have to pay $15, which is, and like they give me 2 free SATs and 2 free subject tests, which is super helpful because like it takes a lot of strain off my parents because we also have like my younger brother and he's special needs, so we have a lot of like care going towards him. And it's also just like so that my mom can do the job that she actually wants instead of the job that gets her more money. So it's like important for them, but also like at Centennial there are a lot of very rich families there. Like everyone has like their private tutors and they have like over the summer they do classes and SAT tutor, and I'm like I can't afford that. No thanks. So it's like I'll just buy the book and have to like teach myself it, and it's like I live in like the townhouses. It's not a bad place to live. It's pretty modest, but sometimes I'd go over to a friend's house and I'd be like, that's a mansion. like there are some people who have like the double staircases and it's like the open and the giant. Yeah.
Centennial actually has like mansion sisters.
Yeah, like
my grandma
right
lives
next
in
to the school.
Like I went over to a friend's house and I was like, oh my god, go down to Clarksville.
So,
yeah, so they're like some really nice places.
I want to try to capture what I feel like I'm hearing both of you speak to, and like correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're talking about this feeling of being out of place. Yeah. Because you don't necessarily represent the demographic of how your school is perceived or how your area is perceived.
Yeah, like whenever I mention that at a reduced lunch, I'm like, there are people that are like, oh, okay, I didn't know you could do that. Because like, all my
I didn't know you could do
I didn't know you could do
that.
that.
Or like, it's like they never had that thought cross their mind because money has never been an issue for them. Like, they always have like the newest phone or the newest technology, and I'm here with my broken iPhone 6.
Yeah, that's why like diversity is so important. Like you need to be able to relate to people in your environment. That's why like you grow up, because like when you know someone that's like you get like this feeling, and like I don't know, your confidence just builds because like you're not the only one. Yeah. And that when your confidence builds, you do better in school, you're more active like in your environment and stuff. And like that's like diversity needs to be pushed like way more, because like okay, so people in this county kind of have like a fixed mindset. Like they're scared of change, like they're like the fear factor of it, but you can't, like they need to go like face that fear so that like the good stuff can come out of like this plan or whatever. And something that will come out is diversity, and the county needs to realize how important it is and how we can grow as a county.
I would like to say that going back to what you said, going to a school that already has like set demographics, I've had like the opposite thing, because I've had people from like other schools who just assumed that I was poor because I go to Long Reach, and because I'm black and that I go to Long Reach, they assume that I live in like the apartments or townhouses, but I live in a house, like a single family home. So it's like you get it both ways. There's people that like people didn't think that I could live like in a nice house, because people always say that my house is big and stuff. But I've seen I've seen like bigger houses. Like, oh dang, I wish I lived there. But like hearing what you were saying, I had like the opposite view, and it kind of like, it's not like I kind of see what you're saying, how it kind of seems like people just already assume stuff about you when they don't even know you. And I think, I mean, I kind of do that to other people too, like other people from other schools. I was like, oh, I assume that you probably have money because you're going to that school, but that's not always the case. So I feel like we should get, in order for people to accept this more, I think they should take the assumptions away with like the schools and certain reputations. And also I want to touch on the fact how if you like change the schools and stuff and change the socioeconomics, make it more diverse, like the people, like if you have a area that's mostly farms kids, that means like they have like it's lower income, so sometimes like the parents can't give as much money to the schools, because certain schools, every school gets like the same amount of money, with the boosters that gives it even more money. So if you have people who are coming from like say River Hill or something, going into the schools and like mixing up with like people who are lower income, making more balance, each school can have like the same amount of fun activities, more, and they could have more stuff, better like equipment, better fields and stuff because of like the boosters. So sometimes that's why I think it's a really good push, because some schools like blame like, oh, like that's why our school doesn't have like any money, but it's also because you have to look at what people are going to that school, and their parents are more focused on like, I'd rather feed my kid than like donate to boosters. Like that makes sense. So if you make it more blended and make it more diverse in like the backgrounds, each school will have a better experience, quote unquote, in that way.
Also, I don't like how like I'm able to assume like your socioeconomic status based on like what school you go to. Do you know what I mean? Like I really, that shouldn't happen. Like this plan needs to like make it so that all schools have like a representative like snapshot of like everyone in the county, and like diversity needs to be implemented that way too.
Can I take us potentially down a rabbit hole? Not too much, but
Yes.
So
Let's get to digging.
we watched the video earlier, and we were listening to someone speak on how essentially right now what we're rubbing up against is our systems that were put into place well before us, and now we're just seeing what the effects of them are, and we need to fix them, right? I'm curious, from you all's perspective, how did Howard County, or in particular like Columbia, a space where, you know, is founded on this principle of integration, of having people together, how did we get to the point where we're kind of experiencing the same problems that other places are experiencing when it comes to diversity or access to resources?
I think
keep in mind, so like Maryland was literally just named literally the richest state in the nation. Like we're the richest state in the nation now. So like a poor family should be able to last off of $19,000. That's like the state like average, like $19,000. And then for a middle class family, I think that's like $90,000 to $150,000. And then it's like upper class family is like $150,000 to like some crazy big number. So like that's totally like not the truth for everybody. Like that's this is an expensive, Howard County, like Maryland in general, is an expensive place. That's mainly because we're right by DC, so we have like this is expensive here. This is expensive. So like, but that's definitely not the truth for everybody. Like a family could not survive. Like a five person family of five. Family of five wouldn't survive off of $19,000. But like in some places in Howard County, that's like the truth. Like some people have to find a way to survive off of that much money, or less, or more. Like, you know what I mean? And so like, but it's spread so sporadically across like the different counties and different areas that it's just like you can't really, like, you can just look at it and you can say that. But then it's like at the same time, like they're trying to change that up. But I feel like if they were to do it, or like the way they're going about it is like the right idea in mind. But I feel like it's probably going to take more to change that, because like the farms numbers, if they go down, then they get more funding for farms, like in general. Like the school will get more funding, because if there's more farm students, then there's less money they can give, and then it's more money if they have less students. But then at the same time, it's like, is it going to be less students, or is it going to be like, because even though you're spreading out the students, it's still going to be a high number of farm students. It's like, it's not just going to be like like it's going to be lower than it is in some schools, but it's not going to be low.
But not like a significant enough change.
So like, that's something else that needs to be put in like into consideration about Maryland and Howard County.
So I'm hearing you say that essentially like this redistricting is a way for us to start to combat some of the things that these systems have perpetuated, but this cannot be the only thing that we do.
True.
That will cause us to have equitable outcomes when it comes to schooling and resources.
And I think we all looked at the superintendent's plan itself when like he was showing us on the PowerPoint. It didn't completely make sense.
Yeah.
There were some things that were just really like out of whack. It seemed like.
some of the elementary school ones.
Right.
Even
They
some
were
of the
like,
high
this is
schools,
not.
right,
This
yeah.
can't be it. I mean, if we do this, we're just going to keep having to make changes. We can't just leave it as it is. So we have to let people know that just because this is what's happening doesn't mean that's the end all be all. There's more that needs to come, clearly.
I think it will take some time too, because there's, like people were saying before, a lot of mentalities about certain schools and the areas around them. So those are still probably going to be there even after redistricting. But I think the goal of this would kind of be to eventually get rid of those, so everyone's kind of viewed the same. It's not just like, oh, they go to this school so they're poorer, or oh, they go to that school so they must have more money, which would get rid of those stereotypes, which I feel like makes it like an us-them mentality, where it's like, oh, since I go to this school, I'm better than you, or you're worse than me because, of that school. Whereas if they were more equal, they would kind of get rid of that. And it would still be, I don't know, competitive, but it would be, I don't know, a healthier, like, competitive. I feel like right now it's not, like, a great one school versus school, if that makes sense. It's more of just like, oh, they're worse than me, so, we're going to beat them at whatever sports game or whatever.
Yeah, like, the sports thing is very true. Like, I know people, like, they specifically went to Howard just for, like, the sports program, but they would have went to Longreach. And, like, even that, obviously their boosters program is, like, better because of, like, all that funding. And, like, if we had a more balanced socioeconomic status, then all the schools would be getting a more, like, equal amount of funding, and you wouldn't have kids. That factor of, like, a reason of why people want to go to that school, that would be, like, eliminated. Like, it wouldn't make sense to go to another school because of the sports program, because, like, all of them would be relatively equal.
The same thing goes for academics, because I know, like, I moved here my freshman year, and I moved here because of Centennial, because, like, my mom worked in Howard County, and she was like, let's move. And so the reason, like, we came to Centennial is because, like, it's known for being, like, number, like, 8 in the state or something. I don't know the number. Yeah, it's a good school. So I feel like if redistricting does happen, then other schools will, like, rise in the ranks, because the really, really smart people that go to Centennial will go to these other schools and bring the numbers up. So we'll all, like, rise as a whole, like, county.
So how do we fix that of people who want to stay at these schools because it's historically smart, or historically there's better sports teams and people want to be on the same sports teams that won all these state championships, and who have these parents who are really invested in the sports? How do we accommodate for that, or how do we fix that when it's in the picture?
I don't know if there's, like, a perfect fix, because there's this one girl at my school who was districted to Hebron and played for us at Centennial. So at the end of the basketball season, the girls had, like, 10 games taken away because she played for them and she was supposed to play for Hebron. So, like, their record was really bad during playoffs. So I feel like that's just something that's going to happen. Like, people are going to try and, like, beat the system, but we'll have to, like, try our best to, I don't know, make sure that doesn't happen. So now there's, like, stricter, like, you have to come in with your BG&E bill, and it's a whole process. So
I think also by giving them a different perspective, because people already have their fixated views and values of, like, how some people, they value, oh, I want my kid to go to this school because of, like, the education. But, like, how my parents did it, they wanted my brother and I to go to a diverse school, like, not where it was, like, my elementary school was predominantly white, but they knew that my middle and high school weren't going to be predominantly white, so my brother and I would be in, like, a pretty diverse setting. So my parents wanted us to be in a setting that was mixed and not predominantly white or predominantly black. They wanted to make sure that we were around a bunch of different people. So I think if you bring new perspectives to parents, and how, like, you already know you're going to get a good education anywhere you go in Howard County. So also, like, maybe because now we're really pushing inclusivity and diversity, and if we keep doing that, I think, like, the next generation of parents will understand, oh, that's something I want to value in my kid's education, because being in a diverse setting is going to prepare your kid so much better than just being in an academically rigorous setting, because the real world is, like, and times are changing anyway, so like the real world, you'll be more equipped by being in a diverse environment at a young age.
You gain attributes that help you throughout life.
Yeah. And you know how to deal with different types of people.
Life skills.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that like I've seen when we get together and talk here is that since so many of us go to Long Beach, and I feel like we're on the finishing end of really like being well integrated and diverse, and like we've seen what that's done to us, and like we've seen the culture in our school and we like it, and you can see that people that actually experience diversity seem to be pretty pro diversity.
Yeah.
It seems to be a wave of kind of misinformation and kind of ignorance that fuels, opposition to this type of stuff. And my real answer about like accommodating people on that other end, that for some reason diversity isn't their goal, like I said at the beginning, but that is what our county is trying to do, and it just seems like counterintuitive to try to like entertain like ideas in our county against diversity. Like that's just I just don't want it.
And it's like ironic because you were talking about how like you were pro-flag, like because you went to Long Beach, people thought you were poor. But the thing is, I went to Long Beach last month for debate competition. I thought you guys were really rich because like your campus looked really nice.
We do have a nice
Because your
campus.
school
It's new.
is super nice.
Yeah,
like
ours
it has
looks
stairs.
like a
We don't
Thank
have.
you.
Yeah, you guys are one
Compliment.
floor. Yeah, no. Centennial is one floor.
try to keep
I'm
it clean.
pretty sure it used to be an old bomb shelter.
It's
Like
not
half the
pretty.
bathrooms don't work. There's
They're
graffiti
too
everywhere. Like the temperature is always off. There's portables outside. Like the Centennial is a very rundown school, and like you guys, your school is very nice, and you guys have a lot of pride for your school. Like you want to defend it. Like you guys love your school. The thing at Centennial is, yeah, sure, we might have academics, but nobody really likes our school. Like
We don't have school spirit.
Yeah, no, like during the school
Spirit
spirit weeks, like only like the people
So
in the SGA
sad.
participate, and like some of the teachers. Like really, like nobody really likes Centennial. Like we aren't proud of our athletics or.
So this.
I think it's
Right.
also because since we go to Long Beach and we hear all these things like, oh, we're poor. If you go to Long Beach, you're poor. If you go to Long Beach, you're like this. Oh, your education. We're trying to prove them wrong.
And we know it's wrong.
And
It literally
we're trying to prove
is.
them wrong. So
And that just builds our community stronger together.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's another reason why diversity is so important. Cause you like just, it's like that thing about sense of community again. And now like that's why our like spirit weeks are like, we're spirited because like we feel connected. Do you know what I mean? And diversity played a large part in that.
I feel like that's the truth for most of the kind of schools that are looked down on. I don't know, for like Wild Lake, definitely Long Reach, I'm hearing. Even like, I don't know, Hammond and Oakland Mills kind of get the same rap too. And like, a lot of them kind of get a bad rap, but at the end of the day, when you meet the people there, they're a lot more spirited about their school than like people maybe at Centennial or other
Yeah, we all hate
schools.
our school.
Right.
Wait, were you guys?
Maya,
was
I wanna-
Long Beach the one?
You didn't get to finish what you were saying.
I lost it.
I'm sorry.
It'd be like that.
So what I'm hearing is having a reputation isn't always the worst
bad
thing.
Yeah.
Because it can
A lot of
fuel.
people in our county, it's like flipped.
So this can be rhetorical, and it might have to unless you want to choose to answer it for your checkout, because we are like close to the end of time. But we talked a lot about perceptions, and it seems like we all have a very, very, very concrete understanding of how our school or where we live is perceived from other people, like from other schools. I'm very curious how you all have learned that and how other students know that. Because the things that you all were naming sound very, very... it doesn't sound like there's a lot of validity for it based on what you all were talking about. Like, the data there isn't there. But it seems like it is a very strong determiner of how people interact with one another, where they decide to go, who they decide to have friends with. So I'm just curious, where does that come from? How have you all started to understand how your school or how your environment is perceived? What things kind of add to why you perceive schools the way that you do? And then by proxy, perceive each other the way that you do.
Maybe like stereotypes.
Yeah, it's pretty much a stereotype of
Pretty
each school.
much, yeah. I mean, before coming to Centennial, all I knew that they were like a bunch of really, really smart people, and if I went there, I was gonna get into a great college. Which came from my mom, because she was like, "Oh yeah, my friend's daughter goes there, and she goes to this college." I was like, "Okay, great, wonderful." So that's like where most of my like stereotypes came from was from my mother. But from other schools, it's kind of like as I made friends with people like from my church and just from the community in general, they'd like tell me things and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. Like I have nothing to like combat that, if that makes sense.
So you couldn't like confirm or deny
Yeah,
what they were
I
saying?
couldn't. So I was like, I guess.
Right. And you're not going to do further. And
Yeah, it's kind of lazy. I guess
yeah,
that's bad
I
on
feel
my
a lot
part.
of people.
Yeah.
I think somewhat that there is a little bit of truth derived in it. It's that we derive stereotypes from that. Like, you know, we are a more diverse school, and you know, we might not be as socioeconomically like above average as like with Centennial, Mount Hebron, and then you draw implications from that. And that, you know, I remember my freshman year, like there was some racism scandal from this kid from Mount Hebron, right? So then, boom, Mount Hebron had a bad rep since I was a freshman, and that's kind of like, at least the people in my Glen Elk had the
Yeah.
Flag
Yes.
in our
Yeah.
football game.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So it's like somewhat, you know, there's truth to it. It's that I think that we apply it to everyone. You know, you see there are rich white people at Mount Hebron, you know, and some of them might hold some hate in them. But then you trickle that down to everyone else you meet at Mount Hebron, that's where it becomes a problem. But there is truth to it.
So it sounds like you're saying a way that it happens is a truth becomes the truth
Yeah,
for like how people perceive the space.
And but every person's their own person. We should approach that.
I think they give like face to something. Like, you know, like if like being black, some people like you're supposed to act a certain way or you're not black, so some people assume that you're like the face of the race because that's just how it is. And I think that and I think that's what he was talking about, how there are some truths, there are certain people who are like certain ways, but that's not the truth for everybody. And there's like there's certain types of people at each school, but that doesn't mean the whole school is like that. And that's why I think each school, well, at least like for Long Reach, when you were talking about our pride, we try to prove people wrong so much because people keep like downing on us, because there's a couple people who are kind of like that, but doesn't mean the whole school is like that. So we push for that.
Right.
That's like the danger of like a single story. Like you're not, it's one person, but it goes down to everyone, and then that just becomes like a stereotype, and then opinions are made out of that, then decisions are made out of that, and it's just like you're kind of forced with like a definition. If that makes sense.
So, personally, so I am a person of color, and I grew up with my mom who was white, and so I never really experienced that. My dad grew up in the inner city of Buffalo, so that's a very different culture than the Western New York suburbs where my mother grew up. So I've had some, it has been weird for me, trying to figure out, my blackness, which I know isn't a thing, but I don't, the definition of listen to trap music, I had nothing against trap, but I don't really listen to it that much. Like the way you talk, the way you dress, the way you walk, I just know some comedians like Trevor Noah, he'll talk about how a black person walks and talking like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I don't do that stuff. It's cool like that. And some people do have that style but you really know where they grew up, and it is part of their culture. Like their rhythm, African music does have a lot of rhythm to it, but that does not define every person of African heritage.
Facts.
Definitely. Drawing the same inference of like, just because someone does something at school, or there might be a certain aesthetic of some people at that school, that does not mean that is the entirety. That every single person connects to that culture, or is of that culture. Alright, so unfortunately we are at the end of our time. So we always like to give like a checkout, basically your soapbox moment. So it's your moment to say whatever you need to say, so that you can leave the space and not feel like you have to take anything super heavy with you, since we did have somewhat of a heavy conversation. We were talking about some really valid, real things. So this is literally your soapbox moment to say whatever you feel you want people to know before you leave the space, and whatever you need to say to leave the space and feel like you're good. I will say, like, let's try to keep it to like maybe 3 sentences tops. I know it's going to be hard. I'm going to give you the look if you start talking for a long time, and it's not because I don't want to hear you. You know I love y'all. It's more so I just want to honor our time that we have together. All right. So whoever wants to start us off with the checkout, we're just going to go around like round robin style, and this is your soapbox moment to say whatever you need to say on the topic of redistricting from your own perspective, from the student perspective, before we leave this space.
My main takeaway is that the new plan should emphasize diversity, and that it should be implemented because diversity helps Howard County as a whole grow.
I think it was interesting to hear everybody's takes on it, and it's cool that I don't know, I agree with a lot of you, and it's interesting to see that it's not just me, I don't know, thinking this way.
So I went into this discussion being more against it because of the change, but listening to listening to everyone's thoughts, I am becoming more for it, and I feel like I feel like it will create diversity, which would be very beneficial to the county as a whole.
I feel like coming into this, I kind of like focused more on, like, I paid attention more to like the like financial or like the like socioeconomic and like academic phases of the redistricting. But then like talking about it tonight, I kind of like talked more about like the diversity part, like the culture part of it all. So I feel like that's an important thing that's like being touched on. Like one of the problems that they're doing.
Yeah, I think since like we're a society and a democracy, that it's important. Like rhetoric is really important, and whatever decisions we choose, build a rhetoric, and we should make sure we're choosing the right rhetoric.
I just feel like we should focus on. I feel like we should focus on building a community instead of building the individual school.
Snap it out, right?
Sorry, air horns.
How am I supposed to stop that? I mean, I don't know. I just say just keep an open mind, because honestly, going into this, I was really against redistricting, but I wasn't really exposed to it. I've never really talked about it in depth, and now I'm open to the possibilities. So just like, consider all your options. Just keep an open mind and don't be so close-minded.
What I took away was that how we just need to, I think people just need to be exposed to the fact that diversity is the main goal of this, and making sure everything is equitable. And that's just the goal of the county, and I think people need to understand that more.
What I'm taking away from this is that diversity is like a really important factor to this redistricting, and I like the fact that it's so important to more people than like I assumed. And it's unfortunate that some people don't really agree. But what I think is that change is going to happen, like, as the years go by and stuff like that. So if the redistricting like does go into effect, people might be like hostile and like angry about it, but eventually it's going to pass. Like, we're gonna look back on it and be like, this. They're gonna look back and be like, this was a good idea.
I think something that I want like anyone listening or like all of us to take away is that change is like a great thing, and that with change, it may be uncomfortable or you might not like it, but like at the end of the day, especially for diversity, it's going to be a great thing. So yeah.
I think it's important that we look at not just overpopulation and socioeconomic status, which seems to be the largest named benefits, and focus more on the diversity part, which I think during this discussion we literally have been, and I think that should be part of the whole face of this movement of redistricting is diversity.
So I'm one of the adults in the room that was listening. And I just want to say, as a Wild Lake parent, I have been so grateful to the school for all 3 of my children for the education they received, which could not have been any better at any other school. They all have done wonderfully. And the second thing is we went there because we wanted diversity, and the kids have friends of all colors and from all places, and it, as many of you said tonight, it has totally enriched their lives and gave them a heart for many different kinds of people, not just people that look like them. So everybody is human to them. And I am so grateful for that opportunity, and I would just hope that other parents who come from a predominantly upper middle class white school could understand that their children will also get a good education, and they will get an education from diversity that you can't get from books.
Yes, Mr.
Yes.
Awesome, beautiful. All right, so I am your host, Trent, and I'm not going to check out because I don't think it's that important for me to check out. It was more important for you all to have your ideas, thoughts, and perspectives fleshed out. So I guess this is the end, and we still haven't thought of a sign-off. What did I say last time? It was like super corny or something. Catch you on the flip-flop. Catch you on the flip-flop. That is now our catchphrase. All right, thank you.